Hi everyone, and welcome back to PCA's Garage, and Happy New Year to you all. We're in 2021, and this is the 20th episode of Tech Tactics Live. Today we're going to be talking about designing and producing wheels for Porsches. Before we get started, of course, I'd love to ask you to hit the like button. Of course, subscribe to our channel so that you can be alerted of future shows. And if you're watching us live tonight, make sure you join in on the live chat feature. And if you're watching this later, you can certainly add a comment down at the bottom. So like every time we do this show, we have prizes, and our guest tonight from HRE Wheels donated 2 prizes. So make sure you put your name and where you're from in the live chat area. And we have 2 prize packs from HRE. We have a standard prize pack and of course a mega prize pack. So we will pick the winners at 8:20. So make sure you put in a comment in the live chat area, and then we'll pick winners. So we only have an hour, and this is a pretty popular topic, and we can delve into it from so many different angles. And tonight we have 2 awesome gentlemen from HRE Wheels. If you allow me to introduce President and CEO Alan Peltier and the Creator Director for HRE Wheels, Patrick Moran. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, now, thank you guys are out in California, and we did test the AV, but if there's issues, please just ask us to reconnect. I know, Alan, you have a little bit of background noise on your feed because you're sitting not too far away from the machines that are actually making the wheels. You guys are running your operation. So
our machines run all night, so I can hear them now out there. So there might be some background.
You sound great, so we're good to go. Let's throw up the agenda if you don't mind, Robert. All right, and so tonight we're going to be talking about OEM versus aftermarket, types of aftermarket wheels, wheel materials. How do you go from concept to production of a wheel, choosing the right wheel, as well as things to stay away from? And Alan and Patrick are certainly the experts, and we'll get their comments on all of those areas. But before we get into it, I just want to talk about wheels for Porsches, right? Like this can be controversial in a way for those that are super traditionalists and always believe like an OEM wheel should be on the car. And trust me, I certainly love some of the OEM wheels out there. You know, you have the Fuchs, you have like O2, the thin, lightweight Carrera wheels. I absolutely love those. But sometimes you want to do something a little bit different. Now, of course, Porsche offers optional equipment wheels, which are fantastic as well. But sometimes you just even want to go further outside that box. And I've always been kind of that guy or that kid. Going back to my very first car, if you'll allow me to go down memory lane, that is my '86 Fiero SE. And don't make fun of me, but I was very proud of it when I was able to buy it at auction with my father. And the first thing I did was I saved my money so I can get some nice +2 upgrade from 14-inch wheels to 16-inch wheels, and I got my, those are DP Motorsport DP Select wheels. So you can see how it really changes the character of the car in the look side. This is my '87 Turbo Look cab back in 2003, and when I bought it, I didn't realize that the wheels that came on it were actually, the rear of the wheels were 16x9s, but they were not real Fuchs. Someone had swapped out the real Fuchs for fake Fuchs, and at the time I was doing driver's ed with the car and going to tech inspections. They realized it was not the original equipment Fuchs wheel. So what I did was, if you go to the later picture there, Robert, I actually had these custom made, and yes, they were for looks too, but they also allowed me to go from a 16-inch wheel to a 17-inch wheel, and therefore I would have more choices in tires, as stickier compound tires in the 16-inch size became quite scarce back in the early 2000s. And I think nowadays they've brought back some of that. So anyways, it's not just for looks. Sometimes it's for performance. It's, you know, a whole host of reasons. So guys, let's just talk about OEM versus aftermarket and educate people on, I guess, the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you brought up a really good point. The first thing to realize with an OE wheel is that in terms of the strength and the safety and all of that, they've done their homework. And so, you know, those original Fuchs wheels are forged, and so then you go to a cast, a counterfeit or something like that, and it looks the same, but it doesn't have the same strength because it's not designed the same way. I mean, it doesn't have the same material properties. And so with aftermarket, the first thing for us is always safety, right? We know wheels need to be beautiful and all of that, but they need to be safe, they need to be strong, and they need to last. And so it's gotten a lot better in the industry as of late, which is nice, I'll be honest. If you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have been pretty negative about aftermarket wheels. I think the industry has gotten a lot better than it had been in the past, and so making sure that the designs are strong enough and they're tested and all those, and the quality of the manufacturing and stuff is better. But it's something that buyers need to be aware of. I think people just assume, particularly in the United States, that if you buy an aftermarket wheel, that it's gone through some DOT certification or something. And the reality is, if you want to be in the wheel business, you can draw a sketch and take it down to a machine shop, and they'll cut you something, and you can legally sell that in the United States. And so you don't have to know anything about it. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to know anything about it. And in years past, we used to see a lot of wheels on cars that were just, they shouldn't have been on cars. I mean, even 911s, we'd see, oh, it's just a 911. Well, the back of a 911 actually puts a lot of stress on wheels. And so 911 wheels actually tend to be much more beefy than people realize. So.
Yeah. So you brought up a good point about DOT, and then I think in Europe, TUV. Can you explain that process and what, you know, how hard it is for a manufacturer to get sort of that rating?
Yeah, TUV is, so unlike in the United States, if you want to drive around in Europe, or Germany in particular, and there's a few other countries, if you want to have an aftermarket wheel, it does have to be tested and certified and all those things, and you won't be able to get your car registration without that. And so we don't, like at H3, we don't TUV certify all of our wheels because it's literally, it's fitment specific, so it's this style, this vehicle, and so it's a very onerous process, and it's thousands of dollars per fitment. And so if I have it for a GT3, I've got to do a different one for a 911 Turbo and a different one for, you know, just a normal Carrera. And so that gets onerous, but for cars like a GT3 or something like that, where we have, or a Turbo, for instance, where we have a lot of market share, we'll go ahead and certify those wheels. Our wheels here are designed to pass those tests regardless, and so it's not an issue. We just go ahead and send them and go ahead and pay for the testing. But that TUV certification allows you to get the actual registration, and they do come and audit the facility as well. It's a quality control thing, and they want to make sure that we're not just sending them ringers when we're sending wheels for testing, right? They want to know that all the wheels we make are of that quality level.
Sure. So you know, in the past, I would say at least 5 to 10 years, you know, back when I was with the photo with my Fiero, you were talking about 14, 16, 17-inch wheels. Those were the biggest diameter, and you still had lots of sidewall on the vehicle. But today's cars, I mean, we're talking 19, 20, and I believe the newest 911s, they even have 21s. So it's almost like a rubber band's worth of tire around that car. So to me, the layman person thinks a wheel better be very well engineered or designed, because it's going to take up so much more abuse than a tire that has a 60 or 70 series sidewall.
Yeah, I mean, as the 911s are a great example. They used to have in inches a 25-inch overall diameter on the tire, and that's gone up with the 997 and then the 991s, and now it's 21s. It just keeps, the overall diameter gets bigger, so you are still looking at really thin sidewalls, but the overall wheel and tire package is bigger. So you're you are still keeping a decent amount of sidewall as you go. And that's actually an important point when you go to buy wheels, particularly with all-wheel drive cars. Where people, if they change the overall rolling diameter, you can mess up things between the differentials and between front and rear, and you can cause all kinds of problems with your traction control and actually damage the car. So that overall rolling diameter is one of the key things you need to pay attention to when you're buying an aftermarket wheel and changing the tires. And so there's a little bit of fudge, but we couldn't put an 18-inch wheel, like a 20-inch wheel on an old 1985 911. That's not going to work. The overall envelope space isn't there. They don't make a tire that tiny, right? So they've had to get bigger in terms of the overall diameter.
Right, and we'll share with you all that are watching. I've got some photos about how to do tire calculations when we talk about choosing the right wheel. But you're exactly it. Like my 87 911 was designed with a 16-inch wheel and certain tire size combo. There's not enough space to, even if you want, I guess if you want to, you could, but it wouldn't be advised to put a 20-inch wheel on there because one, it would look ridiculous, but two, it's just the suspension dynamics was never intended to accommodate that size and that weight off the trailing arm.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about type of aftermarket wheels. I know simply, and Robert's going to probably have a tough time trying to catch up, but when I think of types of aftermarket wheels, I think of like one-piece, two-piece, three-piece, forged, cast, forged. So do you mind just one of you just kind of walk us through maybe the more popular ones and advantages and disadvantages of each?
I think the most wheels are cast. Not necessarily Porsches because it's a performance car, so you start to move into forged wheels from the factory. But most wheels are cast, and the reason for that is it's fairly strong and it's inexpensive. But the cast material tends to not have what we call toughness. In engineering terms, toughness is sort of the ability to absorb energy under load or impact. And cast materials tend to have less toughness, so they will tend to crack sooner than a forged material. Forged materials are also significantly stronger, so you can make the wheel lighter weight, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got a brittleness factor as well as a strength factor that we're working with forged versus cast. And then in the middle, we have a cast wheel, but has a flow form barrel. Now the flow forming is you're taking the barrel and you're squeezing it out, and when you do that squeezing process, you actually significantly strengthen the material and give it much more toughness. So it gets much closer on the. You're not compressing, you're squeezing it. You're literally moving it. You're taking this around, squeezing it, almost like building, like making a clay pot. So when you make a clay pot, you kind of squeeze, except it's metal. Okay. And you're really refining the crystalline structure of the metal when you do that, and that helps increase that toughness and strength. And then you can get a thinner barrel that's much more similar to a forged barrel. And so on the barrel side, you're going to get the advantages of almost having a forging, whereas the center still is a cast center, so you're going to have more weight still in the center section than you would on a forged wheel. And those are the general differences in terms of cast versus forged versus flow form. Then you have one piece, two piece, three piece. One piece is what you think it's one wheel, it's one piece, right? And that can be made either fully cast or cast flow form or forged flow form. Okay. And then there's two piece.
Are most 911, or not 911, I'm sorry, most Porsche wheels, are they cast? And then I guess as you get into maybe the higher models or the more sporting models, that they might have a special forged or... Yeah. Okay.
So the Fuchs actually would have been a forged center with a spun barrel, which is similar to flow forming, instead of starting with a sheet. Okay. And then it was welded, I believe. And so that's how I think the Fuchs wheel was made, but it actually was a net forged center. It looked like a cast center. That's why your casting replica looked the same, right. But it's a net forging process where they actually forged in the design. And that's how most high-end forged wheels for OEs are made, because you could do that in high volumes and it reduces the cost. But the lower-end models are still going to tend to be cast. But as you start to move into the GT cars and things like that, obviously they're going to be forged. Or in some cases with Porsche, 918s and stuff, they go in forged magnesium, which doesn't have the disadvantages of the 80s when we think of mag and all the problems we had with cast mag and all that stuff. They're talking, Porsche doesn't do that. Carrera GT and 918, that's forged magnesium. Those are very, very high quality magnesium wheels. And so anybody that's like, oh, they're mag, no. Don't think that. This is Porsche.
Right.
They know what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of materials, magnesium. We talked about the cast aluminum, of course, steel.
I'm sorry.
Steel.
Almost all wheels are aluminum. Either a cast aluminum 356A or something like that, or most forged aluminum wheels are forged 6061 T6. It's a general aerospace solid. It's a great material for wheels because it's got great strength, it's got great fatigue properties, it's got really good corrosion resistance, and it doesn't have what's called stress corrosion cracking, which is when you start to have fatigue issues when you have exposed to like salt and things. It doesn't have any of those weird properties like that. And so as a general all-around aluminum, it's really nice for wheels because wheels see a lot of abuse. You can get higher strength aluminums, but then there's always some sort of downside that you're going to have to take into account and accommodate when you go to design around it. It usually has to do with corrosion and fatigue, or maybe temperature.
So I've watched various car shows on cable and stuff, and they show like a chunk of metal, and then they go and they kind of mill it, CNC it, whatever. Like, so what is that called, or what is that process?
Yeah, it could be. That's a billet wheel, and usually that's starting with the solid. Just piece of billet. It could be a forging though they're starting with, in which case that would be a forged machine, and that's how most of our wheels are made. They're machined from a solid forging.
Okay.
It takes forever. I think our average is about 3.5 hours to mill that design into the forging.
Oh wow.
So that's it could be just, but it could be just a billet aluminum which hasn't been forged, but that's not very common.
Okay.
So it's usually a forging.
Okay. We have
the real issue there is when you see it on TV, it's like, well, did you guys do the engineering and all the proper analysis?
No, because we just needed to look like the logo of our company, and just have it like repeated 4 times, and then you put lug nuts in it. I mean, that's all you need, right?
Whenever I watch those stills, I'm like, ew. You see the motorcycle ones too. You're like, a lot of us are motorcycle guys. I'm like, man, don't ride on that.
You're gonna ride on that? I know. Well, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to say it. But you're right. We have a question from Chris Henley. Do aftermarket manufacturers work with tire manufacturers to kind of guarantee performance and warranty? Like, do you have relationships with the tire manufacturers?
We do have HRE in particular has a relationship with Michelin, but it's not. We don't coordinate in terms of technology because, as you can imagine, Michelin doesn't want anybody to know how they make their tires.
Sure.
And so we have reached out to them for loading scenarios and different models and things like that to work. We're working together on a different R&D project with them, so there's a different relationship we have with them. With HRE, a small aftermarket company, that's not possible. I think maybe with Porsche, probably Porsche.
For
very
sure.
closely with Michelin, right? But a small aftermarket company like HRE, unfortunately, even with as strong of a relationship we have with Michelin, there's just that IP that they're going to be very, very protective of. We would love to work with them as much as possible. And like I said, we do share some information with them because we have this other. We work with them on their tweel or whatever they call their that plastic tire wheel thing.
So HRE's been around for how long?
78, I think. 1978.
Yeah. Because I remember HRE back in the days, when they were super popular on like Vets and Porsches. Like it goes back. Like you guys have definitely a brand and a loyal following. Fast forward to today, has technology made, I guess, it easier for companies to get in the wheel business? And kind of like, what do you do to kind of stay ahead of the pack?
Sorry, Patrick, I keep taking all the airtime.
The next question will be for Patrick. For sure. Next question.
It's interesting. I would say, in some ways, because what I was talking about before, where the quality levels and everything, and the expectation, the customers are getting more educated, and that's really nice because they're demanding better standards in terms of engineering and all these things and quality. And so I would say it's actually harder today for people to get started up in the wheel business than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. However, there are, obviously, for a company like HRE, we have to always be looking forward because there's always somebody. We're an expensive manufacturer. I mean, our wheels are expensive. We know this, right? And so
You're a premium brand, sir. A premium brand.
Right, and there's a lot of reasons why that is. However, we know that there's people coming and they're chasing us, and so we are always looking forward, like, where is the new technology, what are the new materials, what are the new manufacturing methods, what are the new engineering methods. And so that's where we're always trying to make sure that on the innovation side or the material side, we're there, and people can look at us and go, wow, that's impressive, and we're not just trying to justify doing the same old. And we don't want to let people catch us, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying in front is key. All right, as promised, I'm gonna switch over and maybe ask Patrick a couple of questions. So Patrick, he amazed me because he's obviously his title, creative director. A lot of times I look at him and I think, man, how do you even start? Like, how do you quote unquote be fashionable in the wheel sense, but then also translating the fashion side of it into performance, and then dealing with production limitations? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Wheels are highly engineered, so there is a definite hill to climb when trying to make something that looks really nice, but also that works. So obviously, just like any other design project, we start with what our inspiration is, what markets we're going after, what cars are specifically in our targets, and we kind of go from there. So it really is sort of a team effort in specifying all of those parameters and dialing that down.
So do you start with like a design goal and then kind of try to apply the technical part of it, or do you start with like, we want a wheel that is this size, weighs this much, and then go and try to fit the creative side to that? Like, which chicken or the egg?
It's both. It depends on what kind of wheel you're designing. So let's say we want a very lightweight wheel. Obviously, we don't need a lot of mass. We can't have a lot of superfluous details and surfaces. So we know that wheel is going to look fairly minimal, and it needs to be very efficient in its design. And so you can see some of the wheels that we have. Our 101 lightweight is a very good example of a lightweight wheel that's designed with all of those intentions. If you take something like our P200 or S200 or something like that, S2 series, that's a stylistic wheel. They're going to be heavier, but that's the purpose of that wheel. The purpose of that wheel is to really showcase our machining abilities. The target vehicles are usually a little bit different, and so at the beginning, we kind of know what kind of line we want to do. Like, if we need a lightweight wheel, we're going in that direction. If we need a stylistic wheel or an SUV wheel, we're going to start with that in mind. For example, if you're designing an SUV wheel, you don't want something that's too spindly and thin looking, because it looks sort of like an elephant on high heels. It doesn't quite work. So
right.
You need some of that visual mass to make sure that the SUV or truck looks grounded and it looks supported. And so all of those things sort of come into play when we're starting out, deciding who we're going to make, what styles we're going to operate within that series.
So
yeah, but sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think there's a couple things. It is a team effort, like Patrick mentioned, and I would say you start with the vehicle target, right? So if it's a 911, or you're going to go for SUV, or you're going to go for race, that sort of the target vehicles drive it, but also the design of the vehicles. As designs have evolved over the years, we need to make sure that the styling is applicable and appropriate. And so if you look at Porsches have been fairly, consistent in their design. They get more chiseled, but like a Corvette is a good example. C5 Corvette was very soft. The sort of wheels back then were very soft. And as you look at a C8 today, it's the opposite, right? And sort of wheel designs have to be like that as well. The other thing, and Patrick mentioned this, but and this is something I had to grasp because I used to do all the designs a long time ago, and if I still did that, Atreus wheels would be absolutely boring as all boring can get, because I cared about the purposefulness of it. I cared about the lightweight of it. I cared about, is it stiff, is it strong, is it light, right? And wheels have two functions. They have to have the performance side, but they also have to be beautiful. And so we have a team of people, and we bring different ideas to it. And now I step back and I focus more on the balance of the design. And Patrick's really great with the details and the reflections, and he's taught us all this stuff about what reflections, like, oh my god, And then Roy, our main guy, who he's just throwing these crazy ideas at us. It's like, how do we make that work, But we work it all out, and that's I think we just keep going and going and going. And so people think that maybe we just throw this stuff out there, and we don't. We chew on designs over and over and over. And as far as the engineering goes, whoever is doing the design, actually the aesthetic of it, is rerunning the FEA constantly. So if they start changing dimensions here and there, they're rerunning that FEA over and over and over again.
What is
all
FEA?
of the engineering is done in concert. It's finite element analysis. So it's how you do the structural analysis of the wheels to make sure they're strong and light. And so that's done in concert. We don't toss it over the fence to engineers, right? And so, because, designers give something, engineers always mess it up. I can say that because I'm an engineer, right? And so here, it's the same people. So the people that have the concept for what the design is going to be are doing the engineering as well. And that's, but as a team, we sit and go, okay, we're going to review this design, and Patrick will have a lot of input, I'll have input, and we all, whether we are the lead designers on it or not. And then once we give go, then we have to go make a bunch of different variations of it for different fitments and diameters and all this other stuff. But
while you were talking about performance and lightness, we have a question here from David Gray, which I think is probably important. You talked about things being light, and he asked, can you explain in layman's terms the benefit of reducing unsprung weight through lighter wheels?
Unsprung mass in this case, and it is it's really the ratio of the two. So your brakes, wheels, tires. You can imagine if you have a lightweight car, but you have a really big, heavy wheel and tire, and when you hit a disturbance, it's going to take a certain amount of force to move that wheel and tire over that disturbance, and that's going to transmit into the car. So if you have an S-Class, that's not a big deal because the mass of the S-Class is really high. But on a 911, that's actually going to move the car, and you don't want that. So you want to be able to have the spring rates as low as possible and everything to just hold the mass and not deal with the heavy mass of this wheel going over disturbances. So it's really a matter of trying to minimize upsetting the chassis. So you want the wheel to just do this. You don't want it to do this, right? And that's what happens when we put a really big, heavy wheel on a car. The other aspect is rotational inertia, and will affect, it's sort of like rotational mass, and that will affect acceleration and deceleration in particular. So if you're trying to hit that corner, and if you've got a big, heavy wheel, it's going to take more energy to slow the wheel down than it takes to slow the car down. Not more, but I mean,
and I'm not gonna lie, when I switched from that 14 to 16 inch on my Fiero, and I already had little brakes on it, and I even made them a little bit wider, like stopping the car, it didn't stop as well. It hugged the road very well, but didn't stop very well, nor did it accelerate very well.
The example I always use is an ice skater, right? When they've got their arms out and they're spinning slowly, and they pull their arms in, they haven't changed their overall mass, but they've reduced their rotational mass because it's a function of the distance around the center of rotation. And they spin faster without any more energy. It's the same thing. If you've got big 24-inch wheels and then you bring them down to 20-inch wheels, they're going to spin up faster and spin down faster, right?
Nice.
Because they've got less rotational inertia.
Before my next question, I just wanted to announce our two winners. We have Howard Nelson that won the Mega Prize Pack, and James Giles, who won the prize pack. So Howard and James, please send us your information, and also this time send your shirt size, because we want to make sure we don't send you an extra small when you need XL. So let us know your address information, send it to Damon, as well as your shirt sizes. So my question for you when you're designing, Patrick, like, let's take a GT3, right? A GT3, there's some sort of technical performance on those wheels and tires, and then you go to like a Charger or a Hellcat, you know, still a 20-inch tire wheel. But like, how do you, like, do you get data from those manufacturers so that you know what the abuse that wheel is going to take? Because I'm sure a Charger and a GT3 or a Escalade or whatever it is going to have different performance functions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Alan can talk a little bit more about the specifics on the load ratings and which cars are going to need, you know, more robust features and things like that. What's interesting about even Porsche clients, and you can see that with some of the photos that you have going around, is, you know, Porsche customers like all different sorts of things. A lot of them do like a lightweight wheel, but a lot of them don't care either, and they just want something that looks cool. And so what's great about, you know, our product offering is that we have things that, you know, go from one spectrum to the other, and we have a lot of clients who pick things along that spectrum depending on whether they're just after looks, if they want something lightweight, if they want something that's OE looking but just a little bit maybe bigger, with a better offset, so it pushes the wheels outside a little more. And so there's a lot of different considerations. And so when we get people asking us for our advice on what to buy, it really is a very personal choice. And you can't assume that one wheel is going to fit, you know, all Porsches or all Hellcats or something like that, because people are really all over the place with that.
So has the production equipment for wheels changed in the last decade? Like I hear about, you know, we hear about 3D printing now, like Porsche is using 3D printers to make certain parts. Like, has that entered into the wheel arena? I know carbon fiber materials have entered into the wheel arena and such. So
for wheels, yes. You know, the general way to make an aluminum wheel has not changed for a really long time. So, you know, we did a project with GE a couple of years ago where we actually did use 3D printing or additive manufacturing for producing 2 different titanium wheels, which is kind of what you're seeing here. And so these things are coming into not just wheels, but they're coming into brakes, they're coming into you know, suspension components, interiors, all sorts of different things. So that's sort of the new arena for us, and I think a lot of other companies are looking at that as well. So, you know, our aluminum wheels are very similar to how they've always been in terms of what machines we use. You know, we use a lathe and a mill, and that's pretty much the 2 processes that we use for that. But titanium is a whole different ballgame with different machines, different processes, different capabilities. So
I would,
yeah.
You know, the other thing about as you start to change the manufacturing methodology, say from CNC machining, where you're subtractive technology, right? There's a certain design philosophy that you have around that, because you design around your capability. And as you start to look at additive manufacturing and other things, or carbon fiber, you have to change your design sense as well to match. In some cases with 3D print, there's this idea, oh, I can print anything. Well, you really can't. There are constraints. The constraints are very, very different. But from a design perspective, one of the interesting things that GE project wasn't just, oh, can we make this 3D printed titanium wheel? It's like, oh, what do we have to do on the design side how do we change the design side? What kind of freedom do we have? What really can we accomplish? We could actually make things go through each other and have hollow sections and really get mass out of areas that you can't do with machining. And in case of titanium, because it's denser than aluminum, you actually have to, or you'll end up with a heavier wheel. So I would say, besides, Patrick's right, our normal stuff is normal. I mean, the machines have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger because wheels keep getting bigger. But as manufacturing methodologies change, it actually affects everything. It affects all the way back to the initial concept for what do we really want to do. Do you want to make a Hellcat wheel? Well, that would be different than a 911 wheel. Or going back to what you're saying, I would say when it comes to a Hellcat and a 911, it's really the styling, because you want a muscle car style more than you're going to want high performance style. I'd say when it comes to performance, it's more like a Tesla P100D, right?
Right.
A Tesla's going to cause the wheels to require the most strength because it's a super high performance car, but it also weighs 1,000 pounds more than a Panamera, right? So that's where the stresses come in. So
you went back to design and what I always 5 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. Time flies, I don't know. But there was a time when chrome wheels were the thing, and then all of a sudden you got black wheels were a thing, and then you got all these different colors, and then you've got like a gloss finish, and you go with a matte finish. Like, how do you stay on top of that, or maybe you want to even be ahead of it? Like, who sets that? Who sets the tone?
You never know, and that it's wheel colors or look or fashion is just like any other fashion. If you look on the runway, there's always going to be like a different type of camo, print or colors, and that's sort of cyclical. So it's similar with wheels, or in this case finishes. In some cases there are new finishes that we come out with, but black wheels were huge 10 years ago, and everyone sort of gets tired of that, so somebody does something new, and when you're trying to stay out there above it, you have to obviously look around and see what people are doing, and maybe there's an influencer or somebody who's doing something crazy and they get some great feedback for that, and so you want to start implementing things that you're seeing people start paying attention to, and that's something that we obviously want to do, is to continue to evolve our finishes and what they look like, and even the colors, whether or not the metal changes or not. One time it's a bronze that's popular, and now everyone starts moving to, I don't know, a red or something like that. So as long as you're making sure that you're either showing people something new, or at least staying with the trends that are out there, then you're going to be doing well.
I mean, we're at an advantage at least on our forged products, right? Because it's build to order. So we have, how many different finishes do we have, Patrick?
80 or 90 finishes.
Yeah, close to 100 different finishes. So as one starts to become more popular, it just starts to end up becoming more in the rotation, because that's what people are buying, right? And so we just have to be conscious of it as we're showing to people. And we are seeing a shift, for instance, away from black to more like golds and bronzes and stuff. And that's a switch that I actually prefer, because I grew up in the 80s loving cars, and cool cars had gold wheels.
Yeah, like the Johnny Player car that was black and gold, right? Like that's like iconic. So when I saw, I think Porsche released the new Boxster 25 yesterday, and it had that bronze center, and I'm like, ooh, that's nice. But if you look at that wheel, I think Patrick and I were talking about earlier, if you look at that wheel on the Boxster 25 there, it's kind of a mix of old school, right? Like they brought back the lip look, which hasn't been around in a while, but then they threw on that bronze color. So it's like a mix of nice and old. And again, like fashion, some things kind of come back, right? And I see some of that, but yet there's a little bit of a twist to call it new. But so let's say we're convinced now that we are going to go with aftermarket wheels. So let's kind of shed some light and educate people on how to choose the correct wheel. We talked about making sure that they're quality and this, that, and the other, but I have a few slides here that maybe we can talk about. Let's do the offset slide. For those of you that might not be familiar, with, you know, if you guys can see that slide as well, maybe you can talk a little bit about the importance of offset and backspacing and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially on today's modern cars, offset is really, really critical. You know, in the old days, people, as long as you could fit it under there and it didn't hit the brakes or whatever, it didn't hit the inside, that was okay. I think particularly, you know, on the front wheels, with modern cars, with all the fine tuning of the suspension and everything they do, you want to kind of keep the offset the same. Now, to step back, the offset is the distance from the center line of the wheel to the mounting surface. And if it's in front of the mounting surface, that's a positive offset, and if it's negative, it's behind. Almost all wheels, particularly today, are high offset, and they have a very positive offset, and that means the mounting surface is very, very close to the front outside of the car. And unfortunately, from a wheel styling perspective, that makes it really difficult because you don't have a lot of envelope to work with in terms of the shape of the wheel and everything. And so we actually find customers who have a fairly high offset car, say like an Audi or something, you know, S4 or something, that is, and it's a very high offset front and rear, and they're looking at this guy with an M3 and they're like, I want my wheels to look like that. Well, that's a low offset car, and you can get all this shape, and you just can't do that on a certain car, and most cars are starting to move that way. The rear of turbos and GTRs, and there's not a lot of low offset cars left.
Yeah, I think we've all seen cars with incorrect offsets, right, that are sticking out the fender. Just right. Because your lugs can be tightened with the wheel doesn't mean that the wheel fits properly on your car.
And I would say it's not just looks either. And you know, people, oh, it's going to rub or this or that. Sure, you don't want it to tear the fender. You don't want to hurt but even I had an old NSX, and that car was very, very, it didn't have power steering or anything, and it was very sensitive to the offset. So when I first was working a long time ago, the guys were like, oh, we got to push the offset out, make it look good. But it turned into a twitchy mess. And so the steering was very twitchy after that, and because you're putting a little more moment on the outside of the wheel, and so any disturbance is able to basically get those wheels moving, and that's not how the car was designed to handle. And so for me as an engineer, I like to see the front, even if you go wider, I like to try and split the difference front and rear so that you keep the same offset, so you're not changing the forces front to rear on the wheel, so that you don't upset the way the car feels, the steering feel of it, you know?
Right.
We want
the OEM wheel was designed for that suspension, and the folks back at Weissach, you can replace and put a new wheel on it, but it would behoove you to put, even though it might have a different look, but you know, the technical parameters of that wheel you're putting on should be as close as possible to OEM, unless you're looking to make it, you know, less stable or something like that.
Luckily for us in our market, particularly with the GT cars, a Porsche is already very aggressive with where the wheels sit with regards to the fender, right? So it's not really an issue when, you know, we keep something a fairly conservative offset. We don't go crazy messing with it, and the car still looks fantastic because that's how Porsche created it. So Porsche is one of the few, you know, if you go to Honda, it's completely opposite. Right. You know, it's super high offset and it's super sucked in.
So the other thing I wanted to throw up there was this is a resource that I use. I think it's tiresize.com. And it has like a tire size calculator. And again, you want to make sure if you're going to a +1, +2, whatever scenario, or if you're putting different tires on, like you always want to keep the overall diameter the same. And you especially want, in an all-wheel drive car, you want your overall diameter to be the same front and back, right? Yes. And again, try to stay as close as possible to the original diameter of the OEM wheel and tire setup. And so many people, again, I've seen cars where they bought, you know, wheels from somebody, and you know, they look kind of like they would work, but then it was a 60, you know, aspect ratio versus a 50 or a 40, and it can mess up a car. Like, it can really do bad things.
In the old days, you know, the cars weren't that computerized, so it wasn't that big a deal. Your speedometer would be off, right? Today, the cars are, the computer's monitoring everything that the wheels are doing. So you start messing with that overall diameter, and you're going to really start messing up the way the car is applying power, and it'll start kicking in the traction control. Or if you have an all-wheel drive car, you'll burn up your diff because now they're running at different speeds. And it's not designed to do that, right? So that is a very critical thing. That overall tire calculator, you can find them online everywhere. I mean, I know that right off the top of my head, so I just punched it in my calculator, but it is something that is very, very critical, and all of our guys here pay attention to. And unfortunately, sometimes your dealer won't. So if you're going to a tire and wheel shop, they're not really thinking about that. They don't really know if they're not educated enough.
Yeah.
And so that's where, obviously, if you're dealing with H3, we know those things, and we especially know which cars that are very sensitive to that. So
yeah, and you guys are mostly, you're fitment specific, right? Your wheels are fitting certain cars, or you're even making wheels as people order them. Whereas a lot of wheel manufacturers has like a warehouse out back, and let's say if they're not a reputable one, they're like, okay, well, this one's 5 by 120, kind of fits your car. We actually have these tires. They're 5 series off or something like that, but it'll fit. Like they want to push you what they have, and that's what you better be, have to be careful. Like don't buy what that retailer has in stock. Buy what you need for your car.
Yeah, I think that falls into one of those cases where if you're not going with a reputable company or people that are informed, I mean, I don't think people are intentionally doing these things. They just don't realize they shouldn't be, and that's where, you're better off just sticking with the factory wheels, and so it depends on what you're trying to do. We have people that call us all the time and want something, and we're like, we're not going to do that, and they get really upset with us, and we're like, you don't understand, you're going to break your car.
Yeah, they have a number in their head. They have a number in their head that they think 22s. I gotta have 22s, but your car doesn't fit 22s, right? And so I can see that. Now, most Porsche, let's say cars that are in the 19 and 21s, you're not really gonna push the envelope and go +2, +3 like back in the old days. You're gonna stick to that overall diameter. I know in race car scenarios. Or let's say you take a 20-inch or 19-inch wheeled from the OEM 911, but you're going to do a lot of track days. Like some guys and gals actually go down to like a 19 or go down to an 18. Can you share why they do that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that. It's a combination of sidewall, but it's also that rotational inertia. You're going to get an unsprung mass. So trying to minimize those two things. The challenge is Porsche is putting massive brakes under these cars, so you often can't go smaller in diameter without modifying the brakes and making the smaller. It's everyone's like, why do you keep making the wheels bigger? It's like, well, talk to the brake guys because they keep making the brakes bigger.
Right.
But I will say, it isn't what you mentioned before. When I first started H3, it was very, very common. This is over 20 years ago, so 1999, 2000. Very, very common for us to do a +2.
Yeah.
And it didn't really affect the cars very much because they weren't that computerized, right?
Right.
Today, it's almost everything we do is a +1.
Yeah.
And because of that overall rolling diameter.
Yeah. So. And like you said, cars are just so much smarter these days, and if you put something on that's out of spec, your dash is going to light up like a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
And cause more problems. Let me see. We have a question from Francisco Silva. Can you talk about the pros and cons of different types of finishes used for wheels and how to best preserve the finish, especially during the winter season? Now, I know you guys in Southern California don't have to deal with that so much. It's either wet or it's dry, and it's rarely wet, so don't rub it in. But for those of us that live in a more variation of climates, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think it was in the 70s today here. Most wheel, actually, that's another area that I think has improved a lot. So the normal standard paints and clear coats, clear coat in particular, has gotten much, much better in the last 10 years. And so the wheels, the finishes that come on wheels today should last a long time. And we always tell people is, because of that, you really should just use soap and water. You don't need to put anything really too aggressive on it, you'll damage the clear coat potentially. And so, when it comes to the winter time, that's tougher because that salt's going to sit on there, and you're not, you really want to minimize the time that salt is on there. Yeah. But asking somebody to go, hey, clean your wheels every day, that's pretty brutal thing to do. So a lot of our customers, honestly, they don't drive their cars in the wintertime, or they have a winter set of wheels.
Winter tires are great. Yeah. Winter tires are great, and then you don't have to worry about them. The one wheel, and you talked about clear coats, that was super intricate and such. And I know this because we have some folks in the club that have done ceramic coatings not only on the paint of their car, but they have a specific paint or clear protection or ceramic protection for the wheels. How does that work?
Yeah, it's the same exact as it's exactly the same ceramic coating for the paint on the body. You can absolutely apply that to the wheels, and it does help. So it's going to keep the brake dust from sticking as much, and it's going to make it a lot easier to keep everything clean and protected. So
for maintenance.
If you're wondering, should I ceramic coat my wheels? Well, if you're ceramic coating your car, go ahead and do the wheels too.
Yeah. Got it. Let's see here. We have another question. Let's see. So we were talking about concept to production, and then we talked about choosing the right wheels, materials, right? So if should you consider going, like, how much would like a carbon fiber wheel affect? I mean, that's like big money, right? That's like ridiculous money. But is that something that is that going to be mainstream? Is it going to get cheaper over the next couple of years?
It will.
Okay.
We're already seeing, is HRE working on a carbon? Yeah. When are we not working on a carbon project, right? So we're already seeing that manufacturing methods are changing a little bit, and there's cost structure changing. But the problem is that some of the materials are becoming very scarce because of things like the 787, and so because of the aircraft demand for carbon fiber, we're starting to see some of the material prices going up. So even though the manufacturing methods may be getting cheaper, it's being offset. And so any sort of carbon product right now in terms of wheels is going to be very, very pricey. And honestly, the carbon fiber, that's a really difficult application. Wheels are pretty brutal. They see a lot of abuse. There's impact, and the hoop strength and stuff is a little bit different. Carbon fiber likes to be in tension, so it's a challenging problem to do wheels well. Anybody can, not anybody, but there's a whole bunch of people that can go make any carbon fiber wheel. But it takes a lot to do it well, and so. But I do think it's going to be more and more mainstream. I mean, you're starting to see Porsche. They're starting to offer it on factory cars and things like that. So people are getting used to that, and so that's where, like we were talking about before, HREs. We've got to be looking at where are these technologies going, all these things, and so make sure that we're right there. We're doing those things, or we're ahead of the game. So yeah.
That's very interesting to think that other industries affect the pricing, because we've talked with Akrapovich and their titanium, and it's depending on how much the airlines need it, then they kind of are like have seconds, right? And then you're talking about carbon for planes as well. I didn't think about carbon being affected about it too, but it totally makes sense. All right, so we are almost at the top of the hour, but I have one more topic, and that's some words of wisdom, as you guys are wheel pros. Things that if people are considering buying aftermarket wheels, what to stay away from. Without naming competitors.
No. What I would say is go with trusted brands. I mean, you're never going to hear, and I shouldn't mention competitors, but you're never going to hear HRE say a bad word about BBS, right? It's a known brand. It's a brand we grew up with. It's a brand that we know does the engineering and all the quality and all that stuff properly, right? And so you just have to be really careful with who you're going with, because especially in the United States, like I said, if you're in Germany, you don't have to worry so much. You're in Japan, you don't have to worry so much. But in the United States, like I said, Vu, if you want to be in the wheel business, you can be in the wheel business tomorrow.
Vu Wheels. Vu Wheels. That has a nice ring to it.
Don't buy Vu wheels, people, please.
Yeah, do not buy Vu Wheels. Yeah,
But,
you know.
and that's where you want to. You just want to be careful. It's hard for me to.
Well,
you know,
maybe,
I know
maybe I'll impart. Yeah, I'll impart some wisdom. One thing is, you know, there's places to buy it, right? And I know we shop online a lot, and oftentimes we find ourselves landing on an eBay page and typing in Porsche 19-inch wheels. And there are companies out there that are producing wheels that have no reputation, and they'll send you wheels in an unmarked box. And if something happens, and this is what I share with people, I say, you're driving, I don't care if you're driving a $10,000 car, but it's your livelihood. It's your family. It's, you know, if you're buying wheels, you're probably an enthusiastic driver. And when you throw that car into the corner, or you hit the brakes hard, or you hit a pothole, you really want, just like you want good tires, you want a good wheel keeping everything together.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the problem, and I know, so, you know, the thing with something like eBay or something like that is, for us in particular, there's a lot of counterfeit, right? And so you have to be really, really careful. You think you're buying an HRE. We have people all over the world sending us,
they have
hey, my HRE's got a problem.
HREs?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Really? Oh, I didn't
I've
know
been picked up in other parts of the world with a taxi cab with HREs. You know,
really?
And yeah, they're everywhere. And that, but it's not just HRE. That's a lot of different brands. And so, you know, one good place is obviously you guys Panorama, right? So if you're looking at the advertisers in Panorama, the dealers, the wheel dealers, and like Wheel Enhancement, and those guys, they're Porsche specialists and they're wheel specialists. They know if you go to them, you're going to get trustworthy, smart advice, right? They're not going to rip you off. They're not going to sell you some counterfeit thing just to make a buck. They know this is a Porsche. This is a Porsche customer. We need it. You know, it's going to be proper. And so that's one. I would say go to you, go to your magazine, because it's got advertising in it that are trustworthy. You guys vet those people, right?
Yeah.
We know because we're an advertiser. And so
absolutely,
that's a good source. Stay within the community. eBay is risky.
I mean, it's the wild, wild west. eBay is really the wild, wild west. We have another interesting question right here from Bo Knows Multifamily. Not sure what that name is, but anyways, he says, if I want to have my wheels painted, what questions do I ask the company? And then also, I'll add to his question is, you know, paint versus powder coating.
Yeah, I would say it's also the base material, and that's a really tough thing because you're not necessarily going to know the base material of your wheel. And so some aluminums, like forged aluminum, for instance, you don't want to overheat it. And so in the old days, you couldn't do powder coat because the cure temperature was 500 degrees. And people are like, oh, that's okay, it's only in there for a little while. Well, if you know anything about stress and engineering, the wheel's ruined. Oh. And so you have to be really, really careful when you go to refinish wheels. And if you're going with paints, often the cure temperatures on paints are lower. We obviously do all the powder coating here ourselves. We control times and temperatures and all those things to make sure we don't damage the wheels. But again, that's where I would say go talk to somebody like Wheel Enhancement or something like that in Los Angeles. They do a lot of this kind of thing where they take a lot of OE Porsche wheels and they'll refinish them. And they know they have their trusted partners that they use, right? We're not going to do that because we're only doing HRE.
Right.
But they'll take any wheel. They take an OE wheel. They'll you know, and so, but they again know enough about this to make sure that they do it well and don't damage the wheel. Because if you overheat a wheel, you really can reduce the structural integrity of it by 25%, like that. I mean, and then that's.
Yeah. Boo, also on the what to avoid stuff, in addition to that, when you're looking at a used set of wheels, potentially for your car that are HREs, you can, for most of the late model wheels, there's a serial number, and you can call us and make sure that it was for the right car, you know, for your car that you have. And obviously we can, you know, refinish the wheels if you do need that. And so we can tell you what the fitment was and what car it was made for, and also what color we made it for initially.
So
and so if it's a different color, obviously, Yeah, it's been refinished. If it's a different color, we can tell you those things, and those are important things to know when you're buying a used set of wheels. Um, so those are good points to ask the owner.
So I'll also add a little bit as we're wrapping up here. If you're deciding to get your wheels painted, just know that if you're just taking it down to your local body shop, proper preparation of your wheel is, like anything, going to be very, very important, because if they don't prep it well, they'll give it back to you and they'll look beautiful, but then you'll go and either mount a tire or you'll use it for a while, and then all of a sudden that paint will start chipping. So make sure, again, utilize the PCA network or car enthusiast network, and find out people that you're going to take your wheels to be painted, is that what they specialize in? Because if they don't, then it might look good for the first month or so that you have it, but then you go to, like I said, mount wheels and start using them, and then they start flaking, the clear coat starts cracking because it can't take the heat and all of that. So just be careful with that. So with that, guys, I told you an hour would fly by, and it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. I hope everyone that's been watching us has enjoyed this episode. Again, I ask you to please like, subscribe, and comment if you're watching this after the live show. And we'll be back soon, 2 weeks from now. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you then. Bye, everyone.